Now, there's been a big increase in the number of children needing help with their mental health. The number of under 18s being referred for mental health treatments went up by 39% last year, according to figures from the NHS. It's something that's of concern to Christian musician and counsellor Lily Joe. You might have seen her performing in Sheffield. She's written a book published this week called Talking to Children About Mental Health. Lily Joe joins me on BBC Radio Sheffield now. That figure is quite shocking, and I wonder, when we see figures like this, it's sort of unpacking it. What's the increase about? Is this because more of our children are suffering from mental illnesses, or is there a case that we're talking about it more and we're seeking help more? What do you think the reason is?
I actually think it's both, and I think that we now have more of a vocabulary on what is going on with our children, but also I do think that perhaps there is more exposure to things that our children maybe didn't have in the past. So I think it's an area where, yes, we should be concerned, but also my book has tools and practical tips and things that parents can learn and do with their children at home in order to prevent the children and the young people needing to go to hospital, if that makes sense. So for me, it's all about preventative first steps.
Mm-hmm. Because obviously we know that the whole of the NHS mental health services included in that is under a huge amount of strain, and we've heard stories of people who are in dire need, having to wait an awful long time to be seen by someone. So you said there were more things that children are exposed to that might be causing problems. Like what? What are the things? This is a social media thing. Is this generally messages that they're getting from the outside world that is causing them sort of mental anguish? What's happening?
Yeah, so I think social media does play a huge part in what's going on. I mean, we know that adolescence is coming sooner as children are more exposed to this new digital landscape. So, for example, for me, my son was born in 2007, which is the year of the iPhone. And my daughter has never had a life that isn't online and behind a screen. So it's a different landscape than what perhaps you or I ever grew up in. And so now children have exposure to all kinds of things that they wouldn't be exposed to previously. So, for example, if someone dies in California, our children might know about it through TikTok before we've even seen the news, So our children are more connected to all the things that are going on around them. Also kind of climate anxiety and cancel culture and all of those things that we never battled with, they are battling with. So I think that's positive, but it's also negative. And we just need to know as parents how we can help them. That's all. We just need those tools. We just need those resources so that we can protect our children in the best way possible. So, for example, when my son got given his phone, there were boundaries put in place around that phone rather than, here you go, have your phone and off you go. I'd read that these bosses of these tech companies, they weren't giving their own children mobile phones. So if they're not giving their own children phones, then why am I going to choose to just openly give my son his first phone without any boundaries? It's scary. So for me, it was about creating phone-free zones in the home, so making sure that there's places where phones are not allowed. For example, at a dinner table, really easy one. Like, don't get me wrong, we're not a perfect family. We don't sit around and have dinner together every single day because that's just not possible anymore, But if we are sitting together to have a meal, it's a case of the phones are all away from the table. And things like it's a hard one to police as the children get older, because obviously this book was written and started in 2020, and then there were so many blurry boundaries. But trying to keep the phones out of their bedrooms and not letting them go to sleep with their phone at night, things like that. A
lesson I need to learn, to be honest, and that's one of the things as well, because we're navigating this new world as grown-ups.
Absolutely.
And it's impacting us sometimes in ways that we don't understand, and then that has a knock-on effect with them, and it's difficult, isn't it, to tell your child to do something, to not do something that they see you doing.
Absolutely, and that's one of the points in my book is like we have to be really good role models. We have to get on top of our addiction to our screens and find ways to help ourselves in that, whether that's leaving our phones somewhere downstairs plugged in overnight or giving yourself, there's loads of really cool apps where you can like build forests and things by not touching your phone, things like that we can put in place just to make it that little bit harder for ourselves to be consistently scrolling. And I think that's important. It's how can we be more present for our children, like just looking them in the eye and saying, hello, good morning. Do you know, I feel like it's the simple things that we can forget so easily, and I am so included in this. So
it's a busy life, and it's very easy to sort of kind of get knocked to get kind of caught up in technology and sort of forget.
It's so busy.
To have
Absolutely.
Can I just ask you a question about pathologizing sort of ordinary human emotions? And this is something that sometimes I worry about. That ordinary, it is also normal to feel anxious about things. It is normal at times to feel down because something bad's happened in your life. You've lost someone, or things are particularly difficult. And sometimes I worry with a lot of the conversation around mental health and mental illness that people are misinterpreting ordinary human reactions to classic difficult bumps in the road as them having an actual mental illness. So, for example, you're feeling anxious around the start of a new job or your exam period or whatever. The worry is that we're talking so much about anxiety that then you kind of go, well, I've got anxiety. It's not the same. It's not a mental illness that you're experiencing. It is normal human reaction, and I do worry about that sometimes. Is that something that you're concerned about?
Yeah. So I think there's two things here. The first thing is, some of our teenagers, and I hear them talking, and they'll say, oh my gosh, I am having a depression right now. And it's used for fun. Like, it's actually like the way that they talk. But I think what I say to people when I go into schools, or when I'm talking to a parent, or I'm talking to an adult and they're struggling with their mental health, I say, this is normal. We all go through these things. But if you're feeling this way for more than 2 weeks at a time, that's when you need to press the alarm. So it's not, for example, this week, launching my book, I felt so anxious. I had heart palpitations. I felt like I was going to have a panic attack at one point. I've never had a panic attack before. But actually, it was just this overload of pressure in this one moment. Now, if I was feeling that for 2 weeks, gosh, I wouldn't be able to cope if I was feeling that for 2 weeks. But people who struggle with anxiety, that's their normal day, right? So we've got to kind of put it into perspective that we have busy periods, we have big things, we have grief, we lose people, we lose our jobs, like things get tricky at times. But if we're feeling that for more than 2 weeks or more, that's when we might need to press the alarm and get some support. And that might be just talking to a counsellor. It might not need to be to go to a GP and get on some medication even, It just might be, let's just talk it out with someone who's professional, have a chat and see where we go from there. So, yes, I think we can overemphasize things, but at the same time, we don't want to minimize things either. So it is a fine line, and I think that's why we as parents need to be educated and understand what our children and young people are going through.
And of course, we've got to build resilience, haven't we, with our children? They have to actually, there's that other inclination as a parent that you don't want your children to experience anything unpleasant ever because you want them to be smiley and happy all the time. But that's not realistic, and it's also not helpful. They have to build thicker skins. They have to go through something unpleasant and realise that they emerged at the other side and they are okay now. And that's a really difficult thing to do as a parent.
It's really hard. We just want to wrap them up in cotton wool and just not let anything bad ever happen to them. But yes, when you think back on your own experiences and you look back at the difficult times, and this is true for me, the times that are most difficult are the times that have made me who I am. So we've got to trust that. We've got to trust that process, that they have to go through things, they have to overcome, they have to build their resilience, and that we can trust that when they look back, they'll go, oh, yeah, actually, that was the time when I learned X, Y, and Z, and I am so grateful for that time. And if I could do that again, then I wouldn't change a thing. And that's what we need. We need to just trust them, trust the process. I think we can be scared as parents, and we're reading these big headlines and going, oh my God, what are we going to do? But actually, we just need to trust the process and believe in our children and trust their autonomy as well. They're more knowledgeable than we could ever know. They are little experts. So I think we need to trust them. Ask them, what do they need? Ask them, what do you need? How can I support you? What would it be best if mum did for you right now? And they have some brilliant answers if we'd only just listen.
You've got this book out. You've also got something called the Lily Jo Project. Tell me about that.
So the Lily Jo Project was born off the back of my music. So my first show I did was at an event called Big Church Day Out. And after the show, I had a queue of people that wanted to talk to me, and they were sharing their mental health problems because from the stage I'd mentioned that I was a counsellor. So I had people pulling up their sleeves, showing me their scars, telling me their stories. And I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't know how my counselling could marry with my music, but I have to create a resource that I share from the stage that people can find more information out from. So the Lily Jo Project, it's an online mental health resource. There's tools, tips, resources, podcasts, blogs, all around the different mental health struggles that people face and resources to help them. So my book is just an extension of that. My book is just a hard copy of some tools, some tips that you can get hold of and learn some things on how you can help your family situation. And I hope it saves some lives, basically. I hope that it's so useful and helpful to parents, whereby, I can't be in every single person's home, but I can write a book so that people can have a read through themselves. So that's where I'm at today.
Really good to talk to you. Thank you so much. Really important discussion there. Christian musician and counsellor Lily Jo. Her book, it's called Talking to Children About Mental Health, and you can find out more online at lilyjo.co.uk.